Can a single sentence sink a giant like Ferrari? What Lewis Hamilton's engineer said after qualifying in Austin unleashed an internal fire that has not yet been put out. Are we witnessing the beginning of the end of Maranello's 2025 project? Austin wasn't just another circuit on the calendar. It was a golden opportunity for Ferrari to show that the ambitious 2025 project was on the right track. With the pressure of the first two races on his shoulders and with Lewis Hamilton increasingly adapted to the SF25, the sprint classification of the United States Grand Prix had to be a moment of vindication. But what happened was exactly the opposite. Ferrari was completely exposed. The differences with the head of the race were abysmal. Lewis Hamilton, a driver who has built his career on consistency, precision and technical reading, could not hide his frustration. At the end of qualifying, his statements to Sky Sports were devastating. This is not just disappointing, it is unacceptable. We are almost a second behind Verstappen. That is an impossible mountain to climb at this level. But the real earthquake came minutes later when his usually reserved, technical and cautious race engineer blurted out the phrase that triggered an internal crisis. "We don't know why the car behaves like this. We don't understand anything. What we see in the data doesn't translate on the track." That comment was more than a technical criticism. It was a public confession of total disorientation. In an environment as hermetic and calculated as Formula One, where every word is measured and controlled, these types of statements are not made lightly. Revealing that the team is completely lost on the correlation between simulation and reality is like admitting that they are competing blindly. That is to say, Ferrari has no real control over how its car will react on Saturday or Sunday. It can go well in free practice and fall apart in qualifying for no apparent reason. In a sport where margins of error are counted in the thousands and technical decisions are backed by thousands of lines of telemetry, such a profound disconnect between what is expected and what actually happens is simply devastating. What should have been just another session in a rebuilding season turned into an emergency declaration. The blow was so strong that not even the results of Leclerc, who also suffered performance problems, could cover up the magnitude of the disaster. And this crisis was not born in Austin. It had already been brewing since the preseason tests, where Ferrari showed peaks of speed, but obvious instability. However, up to that point it was believed that they were minor details, early season adjustments. Austin debunked that narrative. He confirmed that there is no solid basis, that the car only works under very specific conditions, and outside of that small margin, it becomes an unpredictable machine. For Ferrari fans, the blow was double. It was not only seeing his team ridiculed on the court, but also hearing from the mouths of his own protagonists that they do not know how to get out of the hole. Instead of showing progress, Austin revealed that the SF25 project could be broken from its design. That the promise of returning to the top with Hamilton as the spearhead is at risk of being shipwrecked before even reaching the middle of the championship. What happened in that sprint classification was not simply a bad result. It was the breaking point. The exact moment where the silence was broken, internal confidence evaporated, and one of the deepest crises in Ferrari's recent history began. Understanding why the SF25 is failing is to delve into the technical complexity of a Formula One car that, on paper, was conceived as a title contender. Ferrari opted for an aggressive design philosophy, with technical solutions that sought aerodynamic efficiency, development capacity, and a stable platform to adapt to different types of layout. However, what promised to be an evolution of the SF24 has turned into a technical nightmare. The most serious problem with the SF25 is not its top speed, or even its passage through fast curves, but its extreme sensitivity to any change in the environment. This car has what is called an operational performance window that is too narrow. This means that it only works correctly when multiple conditions coincide. Specific ambient temperature, ideal compound type, asphalt with a certain degree of evolution and absence of side wind. In any other scenario, the car's behavior changes drastically and uncontrollably. During race weekends, this volatility manifests itself in cruel ways. Ferrari can be among the 3 best teams in free practice, and fall dramatically in qualifying as happened in Austin. This phenomenon is not due to driving errors or strategy failures, but rather to a total disconnection between what the simulator predicts and what really happens on the track. That's the root of the problem. The team can't trust their development tools, leaving them without a real technical compass. A major part of this dilemma has to do with the SF25's active aerodynamics. Ferrari redesigned the front suspension with a pull rod system seeking to optimize airflow under the car, improving ground efficiency and generating more downforce without penalizing drag. In theory, this decision allowed for greater speed in fast corners. But in practice, it has made the car extremely sensitive to track height, spikes in asphalt temperature and tire wear. Oversteer appears suddenly, especially on circuits with low grip or with a lot of side wind. Traction on corner exits is inconsistent, and the car becomes nervous when the grip level changes, something common on weekends with track evolution. Added to this is another factor, the thermal management of the tires. SF25 has chronic difficulty bringing compounds to their optimal temperature without overheating them soon after. This means that drivers cannot push as they would like, and fast laps become more of an act of survival than attack. Lewis Hamilton and Charles Leclerc have had to radically modify their driving styles. Hamilton has even tried to imitate Leclerc's more aggressive technique in slow corners and with a more abrupt transition between brake and accelerator to better adapt to the car. But these are all patches. No driver can find consistency if the car changes character every session. This erratic behavior of the SF25 has also forced Ferrari to improvise in strategy. The team has begun to make decisions on the fly, trying different solutions in each session, dividing configurations between its two cars in search of a reference. But this only aggravates the situation, because it prevents building a solid learning base during the weekend. While rivals like McLaren and Red Bull optimize their runs and fine-tune details, Ferrari is in survival mode. This is a technical autopsy, yes, but also a deep reflection on how a project that in simulations promised to be at the level of the best has become a high-risk car. The SF25 isn't a bad car per se, it is a car that cannot be understood. And in modern F1, there is no greater condemnation than that. Because if you can't predict the behavior of your car, you can't improve it either. And if you can't improve it, you're doomed to repeat the same mistakes every weekend. The Hamilton engineers' statements in Austin were not a simple technical wake-up call. They were an open fracture. A crack that from within has begun to extend to all levels of the Ferrari structure. The team that promised a technical and competitive renaissance with the arrival of Lewis Hamilton is now facing an internal storm that calls into question not only its 2025 season, but also its vision for the future. The first symptom of this fracture is broken trust. In Maranello there is tension. The public transparency of Hamilton and its environment, which until recently was seen as a virtue, is today a cause of concern among the Scuderia's directors. The fact that such an important member of the team as its engineer made public the disconnect between simulation and reality was not simply a leak of information. It was a direct admission that Ferrari's development model does not work. The pressure also falls on Frédéric Vasseur, the team leader. Until a few weeks ago, its management was seen as meticulous, patient and long-term oriented. Today, those same virtues are perceived by some sectors of Ferrari as indecision or lack of firm direction. There have been no immediate changes, but in Formula One time is a luxury. And when the visible head of the project does not offer quick solutions, internal questioning begins. What happened in Austin was not just a bad weekend for Ferrari. It was the point at which a legendary team was left naked in front of the world. 4 years, Maranello has lived between nostalgia for the glorious past and hope for a redeeming future. But this present has once again confirmed a painful reality. Formula One is not one with history or promises. You win with technical consistency, with strong leadership, and with impeccable execution. And on all those fronts, Ferrari has failed. The big question now is not whether Ferrari will be able to improve its performance in the coming races. It's not whether Hamilton will be able to adapt better to the car or whether Leclerc will regain confidence. The real question is much deeper and existential. Does Ferrari know who he is today? Do you know which direction it's really going? Because if the team does not understand how its own car behaves, if its engineers contradict each other, if its drivers transmit more doubts than certainties, and if its strategic decisions depend on external conditions and not internal control, then we are not talking about a momentary blip. We are talking about a structural crisis. Ferrari has built its reputation on technical excellence, competitive passion, and an almost religious obsession with winning. But that identity is fading. When a team of its size loses the ability to understand itself, it also loses its ability to lead. And what should have been a year of consolidation with one of the best drivers in history in its ranks, may become another failed chapter in a recent saga of frustrations. Austin was a mirror. It reflected everything that Ferrari has tried to hide under discourses of progress. The fragility of the project, the disconnection between its areas, the lack of a clear direction. Let me know in the comments what you think about all this.